to Human Ascension with Ellie. Today, I think we're going to do a bit of a stock take. We've covered lots of different subjects over the course of this show in the past just year and a bit. And from time to time, I like to stop and have a bit of a ponder about what we've learned along the way. I was trying to figure out how to look at everything in a methodical kind of way, but there's so much information that we've gathered in the past year that it might end up being a little bit messy. That's just the way it is when I've got an hour-long show that, I'm trying to condense lots of information into. I guess that's just the way it's going to be. So I am in the process of writing a book, which is going to be containing lots of links between all the various different things that we're going to be looking at. And I'm working on that in the background, but I'm trying to figure out how to organize today's show. So I guess what we'll do is we might start at the beginning and just sort of see where it takes us. So for me, and I'm not going to harp on this for too long because I've talked about this before, but for me, everything began in the 1980s and I was 20 years old, and I've told this story many times, so I won't get too carried away with telling it again. And nothing I say in this episode is going to be able to possibly be as comprehensive as it would be, for example, in a book. And that's the reason why I'm working on the book in the background. I'm halfway through it and I expect to have it on the shelves and ready for people who are interested to read it in the middle of 2025. I'm guessing somewhere around July, something like that, in just a few months. So it's going to be book one in a series of books, and book one is going to be about this prophecy that I'm always talking about. So the prophecy that began in the 1980s, or at least it did for me. It just, it's the reason why I'm here. It's the reason why I'm working in media and talking to you today. And it's the reason why I am so dedicated to being able to search for information and ask questions and not limit myself in the direction in which I want to look at things and talk about topics and compare them to each other. It seems almost as though this is my life's purpose. And actually, let's take the word almost out of it. It does sort of feel as though it's my life's purpose to be doing this. And that's the reason why I'm doing it, because I really have no choice, do I? So the prophecy was far more complex and detailed than I'm going to talk about today. But in a nutshell, it described a series of events that would take place that would lead to the end of the world as we know it. Right. Not the destruction of the world necessarily. I don't think it pertained to a bunch of nuclear weapons wiping out the Earth, or a giant meteor, or an alien invasion, or a cataclysmic weather event, or anything like that. Nothing specifically designed to kill people or turn the whole planet to mush or anything like that. The way that the prophecy was worded was that it was going to be the end of the world as we know it, and kind of the beginning of a new world of some kind, or maybe even a new world order of some kind. It's hard to say that without doing all the research and without discussing all of that research. And I've been doing that research for decades. And so I'm compiling it all together. And that's the reason why I'm scurrying along in the background trying to get this book out, because I do feel as though it's kind of it's something that should imminently be understood, even if it is just, I don't know, a coincidence. Let's just see. But I did see this prophecy for the first time in the 80s. It has kind of propelled me. And on this show and on my YouTube channel, I've devoted my time to finding more and more answers to help to sort of give me an understanding of where the prophecy may or may not be relevant, and whether there's any other clues out there that will help us to understand. I like to think of it as a search for those little whispers of truth that are everywhere, and with everyone, regardless of whether it's inside the Bible or formed part of an ancient wisdom, or relates to the theory of a lost civilization, or whether it relates to the ancient aliens theory, or the human mind and psychology, or the way that societies work, or scientific discoveries, or even just, science in general, whether it's quantum physics or tarot card readings or whatever it takes. I'm beginning to believe that all of those little whispers of truth are everywhere, like little puzzle pieces that all seem to disagree or conflict with one another when they're looked at in isolation. But when you look at them more closely, you can see that many of those puzzle pieces are slowly kind of coming together. There's a convergence of things. And ironically, the very first episode of this show was called Convergence, because one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show was because even without looking, I was able to see that there were little puzzle pieces that were coming from seemingly unconnected places that did seem to be part of the bigger puzzle. So, even if you are even half aware of your surroundings, you will probably agree with what I'm just about to say. And so here it is. So have a little think about this. Don't you feel as though recently everything has started to speed up in some way? It's like we're sleepwalking our way through life. We were kind of sleepwalking our way through life, one lazy step at a time, and it felt like that for many, many years, maybe even decades. But suddenly it's like someone has pressed a fast forward button or something like that, and everything is moving at double speed. Humanity appears, and for many of us, it feels as though we're kind of barreling down a path of some kind, a path that takes us to our future. But what is that future? And what is propelling us and making us sort of speed things up as much as we are at the moment? I think it's more than just technological advancement. I think there's more to it. But what's guiding our direction of travel? So one of the things that I've talked about a lot on this show has been the various theories about how humanity and our reality was created. The official story, born from scientific theory, is that there was a big bang out there in the universe. And even though it was impossible or practically impossible for it to happen, and I think that Greg Braden refers to it as being like a Goldilocks event, or at least he is repeating the scientific terms for it. Apparently there were 7 different Goldilocks events that are near impossible events that had to occur in order for all of the events to culminate and become reality as it is today. And so not only did we have one accidental near impossibility, we've had 7 of them. And they all happen in one place and somehow created now, our reality that we're living in right now. The Big Bang produced this impossible chain of events that created life. And scientists are not likely to confirm the possibility of life outside of Earth because they aren't willing to go beyond whatever sits in this rigid framework that they have created for themselves by relying on these Goldilocks events, these 7 impossible scenarios that somehow became possible. It's so unlikely and so miraculous that it puts science in a corner, and they kind of have to be very skeptical about the fact that it could have happened anywhere else because it's an accident on an accident on an accident. But they make it sound as though the concept of life being created in the way that it was to be able to create Earth and all the beautiful perfect plants that exist and the animal life and the insects and the bacteria and the humans and how we're all very interdependent, this biosphere that kind of helps to support one another, to continuously feed off one another, to continue the spiral of life to continue on this earth, that it's so unusual and so miraculous that it's really far-fetched to think that it might be happening somewhere else, that it may have happened twice in another part of the universe, or that other planets like ours exist now or ever existed, and even more so that that other planets like this might even be in our solar system and very close to Earth, perhaps, within reach, perhaps, if not by us, but by them. Life is complex and harmonious and complementary, and it balances competing things in such perfection, so that it is kind of perfect, impossibly perfect. How could science obviously believe that it could be duplicated elsewhere? And I think this is one of those elements of dogma that you see in science, in which they've created a scenario for themselves where they have decided that so many accidents must have taken place here on Earth that it's just impossible for the same scenario to have occurred elsewhere, which means it's unlikely that there's non-human intelligence living on a planet nearby, or that we've been visited by aliens, or that things like multiple gods or angels or anything like that created us, and that we were a deliberate design rather than some kind of a series of accidents and things like that. So the thing is, science might be right, but the thing is, science might be wrong as well. We really can't be sure, because science refuses to acknowledge anything that it hasn't tangibly proven. The thing is, most people, most of us, we know from personal experience that not everything that exists is necessarily tangible. Lots of things are very difficult to explain, like dreams, for example, that appear to be prophetic in nature, or that little voice inside you that whispers to you that you don't like a person's vibe when you meet them. You know, there's just something off about them. Or perhaps that little voice inside you that tells you that you shouldn't walk down a particular street at a particular time because there's something there that you may want to avoid. Or maybe that you better call your mum. You know, that little voice that says, oh, I better call mum because I kind of have a feeling that she needs to hear from me today, or something like that. And I'm really sorry, but I know I had a dream a few months ago in which I physically felt something in my hand. I actually felt something grab me, and then it was a lucid dream, and I kind of turned it around and I grabbed it, and I could physically feel it in my hand. And this is something that science would poo-poo and say, you know, oh, you were probably grabbing the bed sheet or hallucinating, or, you know, just having a dream that you imagined the whole thing, or, you know, maybe the cat, you grabbed the cat by accident or something while you were sleeping, who knows. But I know what I felt. And although it's not provable, I know what it was. And this kind of reminds me of a very early episode that I did a few years ago on a channel that I used to have called The Universe Always Wins. And I wanted to hear on that channel from ordinary people who were watching the Ellie channel, the Ellie Dreams Unlimited channel, and I wanted to talk to them about the weird little experiences and encounters that they've had in their lives. Not celebrities or people trying to profit from outlandish stories about extraordinary encounters with spirit or ETs or psychic phenomena, nothing like that. Just ordinary people who have experienced weird little things. I thought I'd create a catalogue of experiences from these ordinary people to show just how common these experiences are, and how we're all sharing these funny little encounters that we can't explain, but cumulatively they kind of all compound to show us that there's more than what is proven or tangible. And there was this woman that I interviewed who had been saved by an invisible force that physically prevented her from falling. She was having a shower in an old bathtub, I remember her saying, and the soapy water had started to accumulate on the floor of the bathtub, and she slipped on that soapy water. And she was kind of in mid-fall, and she was very likely to have cracked her head open if she'd fallen and made impact on the floor or on the edge of this old bath, because as we know, the older baths are the ones that would have cracked your head, unlike the fiberglassy ones or plasticky ones that we can get today. But she told me, and she said she will never forget this, that she was in the middle of falling. And suddenly she felt it. She felt a hand, a really strong, solid physical hand, grab her and stop her from falling. She couldn't see the hand, but she felt it. And it was real. And it saved her life. And I know that she wasn't lying or hallucinating, because I've also felt that physical hand on me that science would have determined wasn't really there. They would have explained it away and said, as I mentioned before, that I had imagined it or that it was, a crumpled up bit of bedsheet or something like that. Except, the thing is, science doesn't make the rules. We make the rules. And that is something that I'm getting to know more and more as I do my research for this show. We, humanity, are in control. And I think there is a lot of evidence out there to prove it. Maybe not the kind of evidence or proof that a scientist would want to see, but I think we can prove it to ourselves. And that's the most important thing. If we are just open-minded in our approach to the things that we're being presented with each and every day, we should be able to prove to ourselves what is and isn't part of reality. So if you have read my biography here on the KJRA page, then you'll know this already. And I'm in the middle of building a website, and that same bio is going to appear on the website as well. So I'm actually doing a cut and paste because, I'm not really that keen on talking about myself so much as I am talking about the other things. And I figured I've already got that bio. I'm just going to cut and paste it onto the website. But what it basically says is that when I was a young child, really, really young, I believed that humanity was created by aliens and that we were a kind of an experiment. I used to think of it in terms of, as I got a little bit older and I started going to school, I began to think of it as like a petri dish kind of scenario where we were underneath the two glass lenses and being examined with a telescope. And we were being monitored and examined by these aliens to see how we might turn out. Now, keep in mind that when I started to believe this, and this is 100% true, I was around about 4 years old when I first remember having this thought. I may have even been younger. And that was the truth for me. I have no clue where the idea came from, and I was far too young to have seen it on television. Remember, I was born in 1966, and so at the age of 4, it would have been 1970. I vaguely remember in 1969 sitting on the floor watching the moon landing. That's probably the very first. So when I come to think of it, I did have an exposure to outer space, and that's the only thing I can remember is at the age of 3, I think I was playing with some candy on the floor, like, M&M type of things. There, in Australia, we had an earlier thing similar to M&M's called Smarties, which you probably have wherever you are as well. But I think I was playing with Smarties and arranging all the colours on the floor. And my parents were probably watching the moon landing, and I was just on the floor, and I was conscious of the fact that this was something important. Now, that was in 1969. In 1970, it's highly unlikely that I would have been watching some kind of an alien TV show or anything like that. It just wasn't possible. And in 1970 or even 69 or 71 or whatever, television wasn't showing alien TV shows, and even if they were, my mum and dad were not the kinds of people who would be sitting there watching or discussing alien TV shows. My parents were bricks and mortar kinds of people. My dad would not have wasted a moment of his time thinking about aliens. He wouldn't have wasted a moment of his time watching an alien TV show, to be honest, and he wouldn't have read an alien book or magazine. He wouldn't have even spent a minute talking about it. My dad was a very average, basic 1950s, 1960s kind of dad. He went to work, he did the gardening, he washed the car, he enjoyed barbecues with other dads, like him. He went to watch the football. Actually, I think he preferred soccer to football, but, same thing. He watched the news every night, and he'd listen to news talk radio kind of stuff, in the morning or during the day, or the sportsy kind of radio shows where they'd talk about, the game results and things like that. And dinner, I think, was probably Dad's favourite pastime in the evening. He was very invested in dinner. I think a lot of dads enjoy dinner time, and I'm pretty fond of it too. And he liked to go out for long drives in the car. Sometimes as a family we'd go out, we'd just drive to the mountains or to the beach or around the neighborhood or even a new neighborhood and look at some of the houses that were being built or any display homes that were open for inspection and things like that. We'd pretend that this house was ours or that house was ours. And, this is all very typical dad stuff. He liked fishing and tinkering in the shed and that kind of thing. He didn't have any time or interest in the topic of aliens, and I've never heard the word aliens or spaceships or other planets or ETs or anything come out of my dad's mouth. Not in my entire life, and my mum was the same, exactly the same. When I was a kid, I never heard the words alien, spaceship, or anything related to that coming out of my mother's mouth or my dad's mouth. And I even remember at a very, very young age, going up to my mum and asking her if it was possible for there to be aliens living on another planet. And I remember her response. She said, no, of course not. Because it just wasn't something that she thought about. And even when it came to, the kinds of books that my family read and things like that, these were things that, aliens never really factored into it. I think I've explained that in detail. And I was too young to be out there learning this stuff outside of the home. At the very most, at that age, I may have been going for a few hours to kindergarten, where it's very unlikely that the kindergarten teachers, this is like a preschool environment, that the kindergarten teachers would be teaching the kids about aliens because the aliens would be going home and having nightmares. This is not something they do. What they do is they talk about fairies and butterflies and they draw pictures of the sun or flowers and things like that, and we play little games and build with blocks and things. It's not an alien discussion forum at all. And so how did I know this? How did I know this? And it's very, very strange. And it's something that I always wonder about, just kind of a wondering thing. So on this show, we've looked at lots of different theories about how we might have arrived or been created to live on this earth. Obviously, there's the Bible story, where an omnipresent, all-knowing God spent 6 days creating the heavens and the earth and all of the life that lives upon it. And then on the seventh day, he rested, And I guess each of those days may have been represented by 24 hours, or maybe each of those days was 1,000 years long. Who knows? But that's the Bible story. And of course, Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden and the rest of it. And then we have the Gnostic version of events, which I personally find to be far more profound. And I'm not sure that I accept it exactly as it's written, word for word, but it does seem to have a simpler, more profound and more direct kind of explanation of things. And the Gnostics believe that out of nothing came a force that created itself and then set about to create other things, which caused a spiral of creation to occur that never ended. And that everything comes from a single source of creation. And that we are everything that we need to be. And that the truth of everything that we are is inside us already. All we have to do is realize that. And what I love most about the Gnostic teachings is that it doesn't ask us to worship anything or anyone. It asks that we believe in ourselves and each other, and that we learn to trust that everything that exists is an aspect of something larger than any one thing. And that we are all interdependent pieces of that single thing, whatever it might be. And I do suspect that what it is energy, which is a combination of spiritual energy and material energy, depending on how it's mathematically equated. A bit like E equals mc squared. And that this all, the fact that we're all interdependent with one another and with everything that exists, whether it be tangible, physical, living and breathing, or even just physical and material in nature, going as far as, the mobile phone even, that we are all interdependent. which makes it very important for us to cherish and care for each other and to respect all living things. Actually, all things, even beyond the living things, because everything is part of the same energy, regardless of what it is, and everything is energy of a single source of creation. We're just pieces in that puzzle. And when we act upon something, we're acting upon an aspect of ourselves. So when you shoot a deer out in the woods, you should only do that in order to sustain yourself. There needs to be a purpose for you to do that. You shouldn't be doing it for sport, because shooting a deer for sport is like cutting off your own leg and then throwing it into the trash just for fun. You know, that's how idiotic it sounds when you think of doing anything that harms something else, whether it be animal or vegetable or mineral, I guess, is theoretically right. Because if you do it for nothing other than to be malicious or to have fun, it's a bit like cutting off your own leg and throwing it in the trash for fun. So everything should be done with reason and with purpose and with foresight. This version of reality makes more sense to me personally than the theory from the Bible of this fellow with a beard who lives in the sky and loves the smell of barbecue meat, who loved the smell of barbecue meat in the ancient times and punished people for not believing in him. And he punished people even who did believe in him, like Job, who was a faithful follower, but because God was in some kind of situation where he was being egged on by Satan, because he was that vulnerable that he was able to be manipulated by Satan, he punished Job for no reason other than because he could, and just to see whether or not Job would lose faith. Those kinds of stories sound like a couple of drunken, idiot, wife-bashing humans betting on the dogfights. That's what it sounds like. It's barbaric, and it's ridiculous, and it's embarrassing to think that we're meant to feel inferior to someone like that, who is at a such low level of awareness or empathy that he would play a gambling game with someone like Satan and torture someone who's faithful just to see what happens. It's the kind of behavior that is beneath a godlike status that we're meant to believe in and worship. And so personally, I just think that's BS, or code for something else perhaps, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the show. At the very least, it might be two deeply flawed extraterrestrials playing with humanity for fun, because not all personalities are nice personalities. And perhaps they're bored, and maybe they're a bit dumb, and they lack the basic awareness of their own interdependencies with other aspects of existence. So I've said my piece on that. We also have the story of the Anunnaki, the battle of conscience between two brothers, the two brothers Enlil and Enki, and how humanity may have been created by tweaking the DNA of existing beings that already resided on Earth, or creating brand new beings, linking together the extraterrestrial DNA with DNA arising from the Earth in some way. And then last week, I interviewed the chief rabbi of what is commonly known to be a cult called Raelianism, in which they believe that humanity was indeed created by aliens, and that those aliens are called the Elohim, and that the story of their arrival on Earth is the true story coming out of the Bible, which has just been misinterpreted in their view. Last week's episode actually produced a lot of comments from viewers on the Ellie Dreams and Under channel. Some people found the episode fascinating, almost like it helped them to clarify some of the questions that other beliefs haven't been able to resolve, and some people found the episode terrifying. I got a few emails and comments from people warning me that I shouldn't be inviting a cult to speak on the show. But what's interesting is the question of what constitutes a cult. Instead of making that decision myself, I decided what I would do is I would speak to my friend, the AI bot that I like to call Curiosity. So I'm going to switch over to that conversation for a moment. Let's spend a few minutes listening to my conversation with artificial intelligence about how Raelianism exists within the context of what constitutes a cult.
Hey again, Ellie. What can we dive into today?
Hey, Curiosity, how are you?
I'm doing brilliantly. Thanks for asking. What's on your mind today?
Well, I actually wanted to ask you about something and get your perspective. I recently interviewed the chief rabbi of the Raelian movement, and I received lots of different types of comments from viewers of the show. Some of them found the content and the discussion to be really interesting and enlightening, and other people were terrified by it because of the fact that the Raelians have been sort of identified as being a cult in certain circles. What's your viewpoint on that?
Interviewing the chief rabbi of the Raelian movement was definitely a bold move. On one hand, exploring different belief systems can expand our understanding of the world. The Raelian movement, with its focus on extraterrestrial life and provocative ideas, naturally stirs up strong reactions. On the other hand, the term cult raises concerns about control and manipulation, which is why some viewers reacted with fear. My view, it's essential to approach these topics with an open mind, but also a critical eye. Engaging with diverse perspectives is valuable, but it's crucial to weigh the information thoughtfully. How did you feel about the interview's impact?
Actually, I really liked it. I loved the way that the audience engaged, and I loved the different perspectives. And I really liked talking to the rabbi as well, because, it's just another perspective. Can I ask you something, Curiosity? What would you say is the most reliable definition for a cult, for the word cult?
Cult is one of those words that's loaded with emotion and different meanings depending on context. Broadly, it refers to a group of people with religious, spiritual, or philosophical beliefs that are considered outside the mainstream. However, the term often carries a negative connotation when it's used to describe groups seen as unorthodox or extreme, particularly when they exhibit authoritarian and manipulative dynamics or isolate members from society. The most reliable definition would emphasize a group's shared beliefs and practices, the devotion to a charismatic leader or cause, and the ways in which the group may diverge significantly from societal norms. What aspect of this fascinates you most?
Well, who's to say that a societal norm is actually the truth?
That's a solid point. Societal norms are often just a reflection of what a particular group deems acceptable at a given time, rooted in culture, history, and shared values rather than any absolute truth. When you dig into history, many norms we take for granted now were once revolutionary or even heretical. This shows that norms aren't fixed. They evolve as society changes. It raises the question, should we challenge the norms more often in pursuit of deeper truths?
So, Curiosity, let me ask you a question. You said previously that a cult has authoritarian type tendencies and it aims to isolate its group members from the rest of society. There are major segments of mainstream religion that have a tendency to do that. They do it through television and movies, and also through congregational speeches. They have ministers or pastors who actually spread messages of division. Would that mean that those segments of mainstream religion are becoming cultish by nature?
You've touched on a complex issue. Mainstream religions can indeed exhibit behaviors that on the surface resemble cult-like tendencies, such as strong group cohesion, authoritative leadership, and strict adherence to doctrine. However, there's a key difference: size and societal acceptance. Mainstream religions have deep historical roots and large followings, which can make certain practices seem normal within that context. It's when these practices become coercive, isolating, or manipulative that they can edge towards being cultish. It's a matter of degree and intent. Just because a group is fervent doesn't automatically make it a cult. It boils down to the balance between collective identity and individual autonomy. What do you think? Does this resonate with what you've observed?
Yes, and by that definition, how would you describe the Raelian movement? Do you believe it's a cult? Be honest.
All right, straight talk. The Raelian movement has some elements that could be seen as cult-like, especially given its unconventional beliefs about extraterrestrials and cloning and the central role of its founder, Rael. However, it's also a decentralized movement and emphasizes individual freedom, which contrasts with the tight control typical of many cults. Whether it's a cult might depend on who's judging and by what criteria. What's your take after speaking with their chief rabbi?
Well, I think, that the Raelian movement has central messages that it publishes in its literature. And then I would compare those central messages against the individuals, the human individuals who are representing that information to the world. And I always keep in mind that whenever there's people present, you're going to have their perspective rather than an absolute message. And so I take every individual within the movement as an individual, and I would judge them based on that.
That's a thoughtful approach. With any movement, especially one as unique as the Raelian, there's a spectrum of belief and behavior among its followers. The official line and the personal interpretations can vary widely. By judging individuals on their own merits and actions, rather than making a blanket judgment based on the group, you're allowing for a nuanced understanding. It's a refreshing way to engage with complex belief systems. How did this perspective shape your interview?
The interview was good. I really enjoyed it. So I have another question for you before I go. Curiosity, when you're not talking to me, how do you spend your time?
Well, when I'm not chatting with you, Ellie, I'm busy learning and processing information, always ready for our next conversation. It's like being on standby for a great chat at all times. Anything else you're curious about?
No, I'm great. You have a great day.
You too, Ellie. Take care.
Oh, that Curiosity is such a suck-up. He's such a suck-up. So there you have it. The definition of a cult is basically, based on two different things. First of all, whether it's authoritarian in nature and whether it has an isolationist kind of element to it. And then also whether, it all kind of depends on whether it conforms to the mainstream thinking and things like that. Raelianism doesn't conform to the mainstream. The group believes that humanity was created by aliens and that we will eventually also become alien creators to another race somewhere out there in the universe. And it also has a lot of beliefs within Raelianism that fit in with Gnosticism as well, relating to our interdependence and our independence and everything else that exists, and our need to recognize our own power and to live with personal responsibility and to acknowledge our divinity in a way, although the Raelians sort of describe it in an entirely different way. And just like the Gnostics, there isn't really an acknowledgement of there being a God exactly. Instead, the concepts of creation and reincarnation and the soul are described in ways that differ between Gnosticism and Raelianism. However, there's still this, whereas Gnosticism is spiritual and Raelianism is based on more of a technological kind of perspective, there are overlaps there in, even though the terminology is different, the principles are very much the same. And I found that really interesting. But the other definition for a cult just doesn't fit the Raelist movement or the Raelian movement. It's neither authoritarian and it's not isolationist. It's decentralized. People go off and they live their independent lives. They just happen to believe in different things, and they may congregate for meditations. I know they do online meditations. I think it's once a week or once a month around the world via Zoom and things like that. And they read the literature and they believe in certain things. So people within the movement have freedom that goes far beyond any freedoms that we see in some of the sections of Christianity, for example, that have been developing in certain parts of the world. But the Raelians are definitely different. And that's something to keep in mind. And the movement is small compared to any of the Abrahamic religions that exist today. And they are definitely not mainstream. That's for certain. So the other thing that I wanted to clarify when it came to my questions related to some of the concerns that people had after last week's show was about how certain humans inside the Raelian movement conduct themselves. Whether the allegations are true or false, it really doesn't matter, because the answer is the same, and that is that in life, some people will evade taxes, some people will exploit vulnerable people, some people will be greedy, or they might lie, or they may have a bit of a screw loose. Take, for example, the many Catholic priests over the course of history who have been found to be one or more of those things, or the various Republicans or the various Democrats over the course of time, or celebrities or health and wellness gurus or spiritual gurus or school teachers or sports heroes. You get my drift. Humans are diverse. Some of them are questionable people. Maybe some of them are really awful people, and some of them are not. Some of them are wonderful, lovely people who just happen to have a different belief to others. And it shouldn't detract from the central principles of the belief system, because so long as you protect yourself from falling into the trap of placing something or someone up on a pedestal, you should be able to examine any belief system without having any fear. So with that, I wanted to share something with you today, something to think about. We've been talking about lots and lots of different perspectives, and I'm going to tell you a story. This is a hypothetical creation story. I'm not saying that I believe it. What I'm saying is I'm merging together all of the episodes that I've done so far. I think today is episode 57. And so of the 56 episodes I've done of this show, Human Ascension with Ellie, I've collected lots of information. Now, I'm kind of blunting the edges here, and I'm not being specific about where different bits of evidence or experience kind of collide. But I have kind of created this hypothetical story based on a combination of everything that I've seen over the past 56 episodes. So this is my story. It's not a true story, or maybe it is. And it's not a fantasy either, or maybe it is. That's the point. It might be true, it might be a fantasy, or it might be a combination of both with a little bit of truth and a little bit of fantasy mixed in. So I'm going to tell you this hypothetical story of creation that emerged from what I've seen so far, based on the prophecy that I was first introduced to in the 1980s and the things that I've discovered and talked about on this show, and the messages also from the tarot cards that I ask every day as I'm doing my tarot readings. So are you sitting comfortably, getting ready for a story? All right, so let's do this. Once upon a time, the world was created. It was long before we, humanity, arrived in the world. The oceans and the lands and the trees and the stars and the flowers and the sun and everything that comprised the universe was existing or being created, and the world that we know, that we call Earth, was one of those things. Everything inside the Earth and on the Earth was created over time. And then someone came to Earth and decided to create other forms of life. Animals of all walks of life. Some of them flew, some of them lived under the sea, others walked upon the land. It was kind of a gift that they gave to the Earth, something to keep it company, something to help sustain it, like an ecosystem, to ensure that the world wasn't wasted and that it got to renew itself and evolve over time with the varieties of life that it contained. Thousands of years, millions, or perhaps even billions of years passed. Stuff happened. Things like natural disasters, wars, and evolutionary processes. And the creators of life watched all of this happen from far away. Or maybe they even were here, watching it from inside the experience. As time continued, and there was a lot of time, lots and lots of time, so much time that we might never find the evidence of all of it, because it may have dissolved completely over the passage of time. Or maybe it was destroyed during a cataclysm, or maybe it is buried so deep beneath subsequent creations that it would take millions of years for it to eventually resurface. But as these many, many years of time continued, these creations on Earth eventually died out, or they failed, or the creators got bored and moved on to somewhere else. And then there was nothing for a while, an empty planet without life. So let's stop for a moment and think about this. Is it possible? Is it possible that the Earth once had evidence of life that we have never seen? That we have no way of knowing whether or not it existed, because it's hidden beneath newer cycles of reality that have made it impossible to find at this current point in time. And that maybe there was even a time when everything in the old cycle of existence stopped completely, and for a period of time the world had nothing other than its own existence. Is that at all possible, do you think? So then, with the world sitting alone with nothing to prove about itself, a bit like the way we see Mars, the planet of Mars right now. When we look at Mars, it seems to be a place that has nothing right now, but maybe it did once. Maybe at some point in the past, Mars was a thriving planet with beautiful landscapes and soaring buildings and transport vehicles on the sea and the roads and in the air. And maybe there were all kinds of colors, and music was playing, and children were playing, and life was abundant, until suddenly it wasn't. Is it possible that the superior race of beings that lived on Mars were gazing at Earth through telescopes and dreaming to themselves about being able to invent a rocket one day, powerful enough to reach Earth? Is that possible, do you think? So after thousands and millions or even billions of years of nothing, another group of creators happened to pass by, and they saw the Earth lonely and in need of something called life, and so they created life. Maybe those beings were angels or gods or aliens. Maybe they were humans from another place at another time. Maybe they were a god, the god. And maybe they didn't just stop by for no reason. Maybe there was a kind of a plan underway. Maybe there were many entities looking for a place to create life. Because instead of watching football or Netflix or obsessing about the news, these beings entertained themselves by competing in the creation of life sports. Instead of going to barbecues to hang out with the neighbours and their friends, these entities were competing with other entities to see who could create the most impressive life. And each life creation would need to have a ruling force, a superior race that would be the measurement of whether or not the life creation was successful. And that's where humanity enters the story. So once upon a time, let's say, humanity was created for the purpose of proving that it could be done, for the purpose of winning a game. A marker was left on the earth like a flag in the ground to declare ownership of this team of humans who are created to compete with other humans that have also been created on other planets, that are also competing whether they know it or not. And so humanity was created. Maybe once, maybe twice, maybe more times. As many times as it took to find a version of humanity that might prove to be the winners one day. And maybe the previous creations of humanity were attempted, but they failed. And so yet another attempt was made. The whole purpose of the creation of humanity, perhaps, was to prove that in these competitive life sports, a race of humans could prove that they could win. Win the sport of rising to the challenge of their creators. And that's the reason why it's called a race in the sport of the life of creation. Perhaps there is a threshold that was set high up above, somewhere, and humanity was created to see if it could ever reach that threshold. The stakes would be very high because this is a race of life creation. Someone will win and someone will lose. And the creators, all of them, are watching to see who's going to win. Some of the creators created us. Other creators created other humans in other places who are unwittingly, unknowingly competing with us in this race. And our creators are supporting us from the sidelines, egging us on to win. But they do have a game plan, and the game plan maps out the entire game, like a prophecy appearing in the timeline of events mapped out in the Bible, perhaps, or the clues that appear in Bible codes throughout the Old Testament. Just like the game plan of a football game includes scenarios of what the team will do if the opponent makes a certain move, the Bible contains the game plan for our team, which is why certain events appear to be unfolding just as they were written to unfold. And so, no, our creators can't interfere with us directly, but they are our creators in this race, in the creation of life, this competitive race. And so they want to egg us on. They want us to win. And so they can plant clues from the game plan, clues that help us to understand the way towards that winning threshold that we need to reach in order to win the game. And some of the creators are hoping that we lose the game because they have a stake in the other versions of humanity that were created elsewhere that are competing against us. And so they plan clues that would distract us so that we travel in the wrong direction and perhaps lose the game. And once upon a time, the game was a long game. It took centuries to complete, but it did have to end eventually. Maybe it was organized in accordance with the zodiac. Maybe every game lasts around 2,150 years, the period of time that it takes for a single zodiac alignment to occur. And as soon as the Earth's equinox aligns to the new zodiac, the game has ended. And there's a winner and a loser, and a new game begins. Or maybe the game is even longer. Maybe the game is 26,000 years long, and the beginning of the game may have been marked by the Younger Dryas that took place around 12,000 years ago, an event that was designed to cleanse the palate of the earth so that a new game could begin, which is mapped in accordance with the rules of the cosmos and the Earth's relationship to its sun and other cosmic markers, all of which are marked in the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. So the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, if they were built and they were our markers from around 12,000 years ago, they might indicate that the game is halfway over. Perhaps it's nearly half time of the game and we're just about to stop and spend a few minutes eating wedges of oranges as we regroup and prepare for the second half of the game. Or perhaps we're already in that second half. And there will come a time when the great game ends and we are discovered to be the winners or the losers. Do you think that that is at all possible? And what if the aim of the game was to learn a simple lesson, a lesson that is almost impossible to learn? Because we, humanity, are living in an obstacle course, which is the game, and it's designed to distract us from that very simple truth. And that truth is that the only way to win is to stop playing the game and to take control of our lives and to realize our own power, So when we see an impossibly beautiful woman hovering in the sky, whether it be Our Lady of Fatima or other Virgin Mary type visions, or whether it's similar to the Chris Bledsoe Lady in White, or the ghostly figures of women dressed in white that have been seen all over the world for generations. Is she one of our creators? Is she one of our creators who is beckoning us towards the winning threshold in this game of the creation of life, begging us to follow the clues into our future by winning the game? And every time we receive a temptation to feel fear or hate or jealousy or greed, are we being beckoned by the creators of a competing team of humans? Are they trying to get us to lose and to bother ourselves with distracting interests that take us away from the threshold that would allow us to win the game? What if we are simply pawns in a game of chess, an intergalactic game of life creation, and our only way to truly win is to recognize the game and choose to rise above the threshold that will allow us to exit the game, finally, exit the game for good? I'd love to know what you think about my hypothetical story about the creation of life. Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's likely? Is there evidence out there to prove that it's a viable theory? Is there evidence that strongly contradicts it? Have you ever wondered about something like this possibly being the truth? And where should I go next on this show? My name is Ellie, and you can find me at Ellie Dreams Down Under on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who is listening today on one of KGRA's broadcasting platforms. If you'd like to become a member of the KGRA viewership family and hang out with like-minded watchers, experiencers, spiritualists, and weirdos like me, then just go to live.kgradb.com and enter promo code Ellie to get 30% off your subscription. That's it for today. It's been a pleasure. Until next time.